into some questions right here. The first one uses an anagram that I don't understand, but they work at a place that's for special ed students in high school in a center-based program. Recently, our school district dropped ASD classrooms and integrated high school-aged ASD kids without prior warning into the regular classrooms and cafeteria settings. They had been in a sheltered ASD environment prior. Even the staff did not know they were coming to our classrooms, and we got no support. Several are violent at times, and they said suggestions. This is fascinating to me.
Wow.
Because I will be honest with you that I'm a big fan of inclusion, but I'm a big fan of inclusion when it's done right.
Absolutely. I mean, I really have no suggestions. It's a pretty shocking situation, to be honest with you. And sooner or later, what's going to happen is someone's going to get hurt, and then something's going to happen. Like, you have to understand that this is the worst possible way of doing inclusion is just, pulling the barriers and saying, hey, everybody deal with each other. So it's kind of like the typically developing students and staff who have absolutely no training will be completely overwhelmed and shocked and possibly hurt. And the kids obviously are, this is going to be drastically, damaging in some ways for them, because they are now no longer sheltered or protected, and they are now mixed in with not only other high school students who might be less cautious, less understanding, less empathetic, less knowledgeable about what ASD is, but also to environments. They're now exposed to environments that are louder, more chaotic, faster paced, very disturbing. So taking a group of ASD high schoolers and just merging them with typical kids is just going to be a disaster in a lot of ways, because the ASD kids will be provoked to aggress, because most of the time individuals with ASD, of course, will be aggressive or have tantrums or have any kind of challenging behavior simply because they are frustrated, they are irritated by the sensory input. It's not that they're being aggressive, they just can't handle what's coming at them. And so this is a pretty bad situation, and my fear is that someone will get violent because, for instance, an ASD individual might just, instead of being able to say, no, I don't want that, they might hit or aggress. And so this is a pretty difficult situation, and I'm worried for the school.
Yeah.
All I can suggest is that you as a staff member should really take this to the principal, I guess, and say, hey, we need some training. We can certainly help you there. I mean, Institute for Behavioral Training has a lot of training that's available for schools, particularly. You will need some what's called ABM, Assaultive Behavior Management training, which teaches you techniques to protect yourself and others from aggressive behavior. And I would say all of the students, the typically developing students, should need to be educated on what autism is and the sensory issues that these other children might be having, and just kind of give them some more knowledge so that they're able to develop more understanding of what's going on.
And I would encourage you to talk to the parents that are of these students as well and get them involved. When I saw this, I thought, because I'm in a Thanksgiving mindset, I was thinking, we wouldn't do this if we were having guests for Thanksgiving. Just have them arrive with no luggage and no plan for where we were going to have them sleep and no food accounted for. We wouldn't do that with Thanksgiving guests.
It's true.
Why would we do that with kids on the autism spectrum and not prepare anyone?
At all. Or the environment. I mean, if you think about it, there's safety issues here for the kids with ASD. I mean, this is just a crazy plan. I don't know where this is. You should let us know where you are, perhaps. And if we have a site near you, we'd be happy to come out and provide training.
Okay. Very, very disturbing. I think it's it shows what the level and the depth of ignorance is sometimes in the education system, that somebody probably went, oh, well, we know that there is a law right now that is going to the Supreme Court in Georgia about the practices of separating individuals who are on the autism spectrum, and that it's being tried in a different way, not looking at IDEA, but looking at the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so I don't know whether this is a reaction to that, and I'm going, oh, well, we're not going to do that. But you still have to ramp up and be prepared to do it right.
Right. I also don't know what these initials stand for, Shannon, and as I'm rereading this a second time, it occurs to me that these are special ed students, actually, who are, the ASD kids are being integrated with a group of kids who are special ed.
Oh, so there's even more to that.
Yeah, so this could be even more chaotic, because the other special ed kids, see, it says I work with MOCI special ed
exactly
students.
What you see now.
So the other kids could also have their own issues, and this is now going to cause even more confusion and chaos. So I think it's very important to get to let everyone in charge sort of be aware of the fact that more training is necessary.
Absolutely, training is the topic of the hour. All right, I'm going to move on to another question, and then we're going to take a short break. My 2-year-old is being evaluated for Asperger's. He only says 10 words, no sentences. He is fixating on the way his toys are arranged, otherwise throw the toys in a fit. And socially, he doesn't exactly know how to be gentle. But from what I can tell, he will join in with other kids, but more as an observer than a participant. And again, this is a 2-year-old. How do I help him? I haven't given you your pen and your paper.
No, thanks, that's okay.
How do I help him in these areas at home and at daycare? How can I help him at home with his language skills? He gets very frustrated when he can't verbalize what he wants or needs. He understands what myself and his dad ask him and responds via action. And they also sent an email where we can get in touch with them. And thank you for doing that. That's always an option, by the way, that when you send information and you can give your email, I will not share that when I post a question online.
Right. So the psychologist in me says that you may be assuming that the issues that your child is exhibiting are not that severe. And you may be thinking this is something mild and will possibly, with a little bit of intervention from me as the parent, will pass and my child will just kick in and start learning typically. I caution you about thinking that way, because it is always better to be more intrusive, I suppose, and involved and do more intervention rather than less, especially at this age, because you are just entering this kind of window of opportunity, and I would hate for you to waste it by doing too little, because you can't get this age back. Now, if your child only says 10 words, no sentences, he's fixated on the way his toys are arranged. In other words, he insists on them being arranged a certain way. Otherwise, he'll throw the toys and have a fit. And he doesn't exactly know how to be gentle, which means he'll kind of grab things. And he's not really, although he does observe maybe the other kids, but he's not really able to see things from their perspective or understand that they might get hurt. If those things are happening and his language has not developed, he's getting frustrated when he can't verbalize and all those types of things, you are describing the early signs of autism. Let's just be very clear. I have to tell you that nobody would be evaluating your child right now for Asperger's. Asperger's doesn't exist anymore as a diagnosis. It is now a part of the ASD spectrum. So they would be evaluating your child for autism spectrum disorder, and they will determine what level of support your child needs. Someone could certainly diagnose your child as having ASD Asperger's type, which means they will get very, very little support. Again, my caution to you is it would be very unusual and rare to have a 2-year-old with these symptoms diagnosed with Asperger's type. These are the early symptoms of ASD, the typical early symptoms of ASD. And what happens is that if you don't give a massive amount of intervention right off the bat, things get worse. The child gets more frustrated because the other kids are developing more language. Life generally speeds up after age 2 and becomes more chaotic, and kids are running around, and you have to pay attention to much more social and abstract stuff in your world. When you're 2, it's more concrete. When you're 3, 4, things become pretty abstract, and you have to start reading other people's facial expressions, body language, paying attention to them while knowing how to pay attention to other things that are more important. There's a lot going on at 3. So my recommendation is that you find immediately a psychologist or a developmental pediatrician or someone who is able to do a diagnostic workup right away, get your diagnosis in place. That would be your first step, and you should do that this month, like immediately. The second thing would be to then take that to your insurance company, and hopefully you're in a state where you will get some form of funding, and get funding. If you don't have insurance, in most states right now there is a Medicaid help for this, so you will want to do that, get your funding in place. And then you will need to find an ABA center, so someone who's a board-certified behavior analyst doing ABA, or applied behavior analysis, and then that's where you will get your intensive ABA. And for a 2-year-old, 2 to 3 is the age where we do intensive, what's called EIBI, or early intensive behavioral intervention, which means your child would be scheduled for anywhere between 26 and 40 hours a week of one-to-one therapy. I will repeat that, 26 to 40 hours a week. That means 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Or if you're going to do it 7 days a week, which is even better, then you could do fewer hours. But 5 to 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I cannot stress enough how important it is that you do those hours, because you will hear, even from ABA providers who are newer or coerced, and you will hear from your physician, pediatrician, or whoever you see for the diagnosis perhaps, you will hear from a lot of people in the world that doing 10 hours a week is enough. It is not going to be necessarily enough. Very, 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 very few children actually do what they're capable of with 10 hours a week. So you need to increase the hours. You need to do a massive number of hours. This is the most important advice I can give you, especially in the first 2 years. And so this is critical, and you need to get this rolling. If you are close to a card site, then we'll take care of you, and you just need to get on to our 1-800 number and call in and do all of our stuff, which, we do a pretty extensive intake evaluation process, so you'd have to get that started. But and since your child is 2, you'd get started with card immediately, by the way, because 2-year-olds don't have school, so we can work with them in the mornings. And we take our kids immediately to our centers and start them. So I really strongly encourage you, if your child is high functioning and has just language, social, and a few behaviors, this is like really where you need to push as hard as you can, because this is the type of child who still has all of the possibilities for a full recovery. So please, please make sure that you get your intensive therapy.
Okay, so just to recap, I know as a parent that we are conditioned to want to go into a doctor's office and not get a diagnosis or get the least diagnosis.
Right.
That's a rational thing that we've been brought up to think.
Of course.
I know when I walked into the doctor's office when my child was being diagnosed that I was hoping to get, not autism was my number one thing. PDD-NOS was my second thing that I was like, because that, was a lesser form, not as severe, or an Asperger, but not the autism. In fact, the reality is that if you get the autism diagnosis, you're more likely to get the therapy that would be needed to help your child.
Right.
So let go of wishing for some lesser diagnosis.
Which you can't even get anymore.
Right.
I mean, if someone diagnoses your child Asperger's, then they're behind and they shouldn't be diagnosing.
Right.
Because that changed 2 years ago. So we're talking about you will get an ASD diagnosis, and the person hopefully making recommendations will make recommendations that are based on the level of support your child really needs.
And then, you know, it's that thing of we want to get bogged down in the diagnosis. But what we want to get bogged down in is actually making sure that we get the help on board.
That's right.
So you got to get on a list to get good quality ABA, and then you got to start digging your heels in to get the fight to make sure that you've got what's in the window, which you heard very distinctly from Dr. Granpeesheh, 26 to 40 hours. And, you know, I would push it more towards the 40 than the 26.
I would as well, and I'm only saying the 26 because if the child's 2,
yes,
you will gradually increase to 40 hours. I mean, let me just tell you, just do this, please. Like, don't waste this time. Don't. There's so many parents who come to me and they're crying and upset because someone else told them to do less and now they're regretting it. You can't get that time back, and there's no harm. This is such a luxury. That you will get, and there's no fear involved with getting this diagnosis. Don't worry, like just let it be, because it'll open up doors to funding for you. And it's so important to get the right help right now. It's like getting intensive tutoring. Your child will do better in everything. They'll be incredibly ahead of other kids, you know, if it's too much, which it really is never too much. There's so much stuff to be taught.
And you will never regret that.
You'll never, ever regret it.
But if you don't do this now, I guarantee
Good point.
You will come back later and go, why did I not do that? Because I listened to that doctor, and I listened to my mother-in-law, and I listened to my friend Rebecca, who said that seems like a lot, right? You just heard it from the expert in autism. You need to get on that stick.
Yeah, and you know what? Go on Amazon and order Recovered Journeys Through Autism and Back, which is a film I made a few years ago. And all 4 of those parents in this film were told not to do ABA, or it's too much to put their child in special ed and so on and so forth. And if you watch that, and I think even on the second DVD that goes with it, there's a section that one of the parents talks about what would have happened if I had listened to all these other very fancy professionals at a very well-known university who told me not to do anything about it because my child will never be better.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really important that you just do as much as you can right now.
You've got an opportunity, and you just had the message come. Take advantage of it. With this next question, hi Shannon and Dr. Doreen, I need help with my 5.6-year-old son. He won't sleep in his bed at night. His bed is in my room because there's only one bedroom in my apartment. He falls asleep in his bed, but every night climbs into mine. I take him back and stay a few minutes with him in his bed because he says he's scared. If I leave his bed before he's fallen asleep, he'll start saying, "Can I come to your bed?" and whining. There's a little nightlight in the room, but he's still scared. He'll start saying things like, "What's over there?" Any shadow in the room, he'll ask, "What is that?" and sounds and looks really scared. I really feel very bad for him since he's little. I know he's afraid of the dark. That's why I have a nightlight in the room. Does not matter how many times at night I take him to his bed, he still comes back. And in the morning, we're both really tired. Please help me, and thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough situation. So just a very quick solution right now is let's not make this the biggest battle in our lives, because you have other battles to fight probably. And, you know, one of the most important things I think is for you and for him to get sleep. So what I would recommend is, if at all possible, rearrange your room. And since it is one room that you're both sleeping in, rearrange the room so that his bed is next to yours, like touching yours, in fact, so that he is sleeping in his bed and you're sleeping in your bed, but you could reach out if you needed to and touch him, and he could do the same. Why don't you start with that, and then let him sleep, let you sleep, catch up on sleep. And I honestly don't know that it would benefit you to do much more past that until you're able to get a place that actually allows you to have some separation. There are no other options right now. You don't have another room. If if it was possible to have him eventually sleep in the living room. I'm not sure if you feel comfortable with that. If you do, then what you do is you gradually will move his bed away from yours tiny amounts over the course of a year so that he doesn't really feel the difference very much, and then he'll be comfortable. But for now, I feel like this is not necessarily shouldn't be the biggest stressor. You have other things to worry about right now, and we can sometimes forgive these things. As long as he's in his own bed, sleeping right next to you, it wouldn't be much of a difference if he's in his own bed on the other side of your room. You still have the same level issues. Sometimes with night lights, kids see more shadows than without. That is something that you might want to think about as well. In other words, either increase the illumination or decrease it completely. And then the other thing is, don't engage when he's asking you questions and so on. Just try to reduce the answering of that sort of thing. He is, after all, going to be very close to you. Perhaps try to teach him to perhaps do some soothing things, like have music in the background. I know it's kind of uncomfortable, but the best sleep that I have is when I have my Bose headphones on, because I don't hear anything else. And they're amazing. Another thing I've heard from parents is very helpful, I do this as well, is to have noise canceling, white noise in the background. So a lot of air filter machines or fans will produce that kind of white noise so that he doesn't hear background things. You might want to see if he's willing to have what are they called?
It's
things
like a face
on
mask.
face
The eye
mask
yeah.
things on. Some people sleep. My daughter, for instance, started doing that herself, and she can't sleep without it now.
Wow.
So and some people, by the way, are very reactive to light. So it might be important to test and see if he does better if it's dark versus completely light. And then the other thing is, I sleep much better if I take Benadryl, which is pretty harmless. And he's 5.5, so 25 milligrams, just one Benadryl, is like what you have if you have allergic reaction to stuff, and or melatonin. Like if he's having a rough time sleeping anyway, it sounds like the nighttime has become an anxious time for him. So you'll have to kind of work on not just having him right next to you, but you'll have to work on making it a more pleasant time. So those are some of the things you could think about.
Okay, wonderful. There's another
question. Bedtime, yeah.
Another bedtime question. I put them next to each other, but they are different children. My 5-year-old seems to have a lot of energy at bedtime, which makes it difficult to put him to bed. Any suggestions? And he has high-functioning autism.
And I would, with this child, I would really consider talking to the pediatrician and seeing if it's okay for you to add either Benadryl, which is diphenhydramine, or melatonin to his nighttime routine. Melatonin is pretty harmless. It's good for you, in fact, in some ways, to have the 5-HTP. So just talk to the pediatrician, make sure it's okay. I always recommend tranquil sleep, which I like a lot. I would highly suggest that you do that. It helps a lot. Maybe try to work out his energy earlier in the day. Definitely don't let him eat or drink after, let's say, 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. because that tends to increase energy level. Do some calming activities from 6 on so that he learns to rest. As I said, one of the things that's very calming for me is usually, and for a lot of kids, is usually music through headphones, maybe reading, if you can read him a story. Those are the types of things. I know it's a tough time because that is the time where we as parents want to try to do our own thing or relax as much as possible. It's so hard. Another thing is, don't forget that if you do actually give him if you can have someone help you teach him a calming activity or routine from, let's say, 7 to 8 before he sleeps. Don't forget that the rocking motion of a rocking chair is actually very calming because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So rocking this way is a calming thing. Yeah. So those are something, like having him sit in a rocking chair and listen to music would be something very good.
One of the best pieces of advice that a friend gave me, who has 2 really wonderful, fabulous kind young men. They're like, I think they're 16 and 20 now. But when they were younger, I remember they were just like those 11-year-olds that were just kind and nice. And I always would say to her, what is your secret? What do you do with boys that, and she said, oh, I just run them like dogs. She said, I said, what? And she said, I run them like dogs. They swim every day.
Yes.
They run every day.
Yes.
I make them constantly be going so that they're too busy to
It's
get
so
into
true.
anything or do anything. And she said, and when night comes and I'm done, they are exhausted.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the number one thing. It's so true. If you can run them, then he'll be tired.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to get that crocheted onto a pillow at some point.
Run them like
Run them
dogs.
like dogs. The great advice from a good friend who happens to be she's not a doula, she's a midwife.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So she knows a lot about babies. In any case, I digress. All right. I want to move on to a question. Hello, how do I teach my nonverbal son to request something to drink? He's 14. I know he's thirsty, but he won't use his board to say he's thirsty or to ask for water.
So I'd have a lot of questions about this. So, but I mean, it's hard to give feedback without knowing these things. First of all, he's 14. So good Lord, I hope that he is using the rest of his PEX board. And I think you're referring to a PEX board when you say his board. But in any case, my biggest question is how are you determining that he is thirsty? Because you know that he's thirsty. Does he indicate somehow? Does he take you by the hand to the fridge? Does he point to things? Does he try to show you that he wants something? Or are you just assuming that he's thirsty and you give him a drink and he drinks it? I guess we'll go through both. If it's the first, if he somehow indicates to you that he is thirsty, then every time he does that, you have to prompt him or model for him to take to point to the board and or give you the velcroed on icon of a drink in order to receive a drink. If he's not, and you are just assuming it based on a particular schedule, then keep it on a schedule, and then make sure that every time this buzzer goes or something that you model for him to take the Velcro and give it to you. Now, a lot of times when we use boards, pointing is not a natural thing for our kids, and they don't necessarily understand that they're pointing to this one icon which gets them this thing. But taking a small icon that has been Velcroed onto a board and taking it off and handing it to you and trading it for a drink is much more of a communicative thing that occurs and helps kids understand that that's what they're actually doing. So I highly recommend that you do that. Now, if he doesn't, I don't know what his use of the rest of the board is, but when I have issues like this, I introduce the icon on its own. And then I merge it gradually onto the board so that it then becomes part of a bigger board. But if you put the icon on there with 20 other things, which by the way, no board should ever have more than 20 things on one page. But if you do put it on there, it could get lost and confused, and he might not know necessarily that what he's going for. So it would be important to start it on its own and then perhaps have it with a few other requests like food or what other things that he wants. But I cannot stress the importance of having a very well functioning visual system in place for someone who's nonverbal and 14. It's probably the most important thing you can do for your child. Whether it's an augmentative device, an iPad, a PEX board, a PEX book, whatever it is, please have an expert to help develop this for your child. Getting something to drink is the least of your problems. As he ages, you are going to have teach him to communicate at least 50 very important things in order for him not to become frustrated and aggressive and so on. So it's very important that you develop this visual system for him right now.
Absolutely. Enrich their life, enrich your life. Really, really big game changer.
And I believe there's a module on our IBT site,
Yes.
which is just about visual systems.
Yes.
So please take a look at that.
ibehavioraltraining.com. Since we were talking about exercise, somebody said, how do I increase the exercise level of my nonverbal teenager? She loves to eat and has put on a lot of weight. She has very few interests.
Teenager, nonverbal.
Teenager, nonverbal,
and they
girl.
just want to know how to increase exercise.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I assume that the teenager has someone helping take care of her or has some activities during the day, and you just have to build in exercises or physical activities and then reward them. Any kind of behavior that you want to increase, you just place it into her schedule and then you immediately reward it. And you can start with very small amounts. So let's say you want her to go for a 20-minute walk every day. I would just start with a 5-minute walk and then give her a highly rewarding stimulus, anything that she likes. So, which she doesn't otherwise have access to. That's very important. If she has access to her favorite things all the time, then they satiate and they don't have as much reward power. So I'd find something that she really likes, perhaps a particular video or TV show or whatever it is, and make that contingent upon some sort of physical exercise. And I would start with a low amount of physical exercise and then gradually increase it, just like we do for ourselves. I mean, I'll motivate every once in a while I'll get off my regime and then I'll get back on and I'll be like, okay, I'll do a 15-minute walk today. And then that gradually increases to a half-hour workout session, but it takes a while to get there, and I have to make sure that there's enough of, for most of us, just kind of reducing the guilt or feeling better is enough of a reward. Well, after
most of you mean most of you, not most of us.
But. So then you have to really place reinforcements in your life that are based on that. Yeah.
But I know that one of the things with my son, that what that motion was, I know I'm the last person to talk about motivating anybody to exercise, but maybe coming from me, since it's something I struggle with, there are so many things now that are meant to be reinforcing. There's a whole bunch of video games. There's all those Just Dance videos and where there's the avatar.
That's Wii stuff.
And the Wii stuff. The avatar is dancing with you.
It's unbelievably fun.
And so you don't know how bad you look because you're looking at the avatar and your mirror neurons kind of light up and go, I look like that. Sometimes they have the little camera that shows you what you look like. That's not good for me. But the other ones are good. And there are tons of video games.
So true. And the Wii especially is very, very good for sports because you really can have, I remember the first time I saw a Wii, it was the boxing.
Yeah.
And I tried it, and within about 5 minutes, I was sweating. I couldn't believe how intense it was. And then if you keep doing, there's so much now. There's everything from golf, tennis, but you name it, there's everything on the Wii. The dance stuff is spectacular. It's unbelievable. You do that for 5 or 10 minutes. I can't even keep up. My daughter is always asking me to do that with her, and it's crazy exercise. So your daughter might really like that. That's a great idea.
And Jem and I will do that sometimes together in the kitchen. You just got to move the furniture back and make sure that you don't have a ceiling fan that's going to catch anybody. I learned that the hard way. Anyway, so let us know, though, what you eventually do and what works, because somebody else will appreciate knowing that. Okay, somebody wrote in and said, good morning. My high-functioning 7-year-old still reverses letters. P and B, M and W, B and D. It's in his reading and writing. Any suggestions? And thanks.
Well, this is a P and B, M and W, and
B and D.
Yeah. Okay, so these are just the ones that are very similar to each other. So this is I have 2 suggestions. One is that you would, first of all, whoever taught him letters, or if it is you or a teacher, or if it's an ABA therapist or someone, they just need to go back and do better discrimination training. So the 2 that are confused need to be placed aside next to each other and practiced. So both receptively and expressively. So like give me P versus give me D a lot, so that he or she gets a lot more practice with this. But one of the things that I find helps my kids when I try to teach this is that I will make a drawing of the letter that is something that starts with that letter. So for instance, for the P, I will turn it into a pig. For the D, I will draw a dog. And then I gradually will reduce the features of the dog, so that my child, when they see that letter, they automatically see dog, and it's like, okay, dog is D, and that helps them remember. So I think some sort of a visual cue on the letter itself will help.
They actually have little cards that have drawings
There
on
you
them
go.
that go, because it's the bubble. Which way does the bubble go?
Right,
You know,
exactly.
and so if on the dog drawing, it has the nose, and the nose points that way.
Right.
So they even yes, those are
Those
available,
already exist.
flashcards.
Great.
Yes.
And also, I mean, M and W is pretty straight. It's McDonald's, right? M
Right.
is McDonald's. That's the
There we
easiest
go.
one.
There we go. Now I want to get to this question because we're running out of time, but they wrote in and said, Dr. Doreen, I get notes home constantly about escape. My son, even if giving a little bit of access, will try. Oh, it just disappeared from my screen. Oh, I so hate that, how that happened. I have no idea what happened, Kelby.
Okay.
But
while you're looking for that,
I know that I
Okay,
pre-read
okay.
it though.
Go ahead,
And it
go
said
ahead.
that their IEP is tomorrow.
Okay.
And there's a discussion about a BIP. But he's trying to escape no matter what happens. I will try to get that back.
well, I mean, the solution for escape maintained behavior is to not allow escape. So it's really that simple. If someone has already identified that the function of your child's behaviors, let's say he tantrums in order to escape the classroom, the solution is to not allow the escape and to instead replace give the child an alternative way of expressing a desire to leave. So for instance, with the child should be given the ability to ask for a break, and therefore be given, taken out for a short stroll and brought back. But escape behavior is always just that. It's trying to escape a situation, trying to escape a demand, and it's very difficult. The way to manage it is to make sure the child has a way to ask for what they want, which is escape, but then also, very important, because we can't always allow our kids to escape, right? If they're in the middle of a demand, they kind of have to complete the demand. So what becomes very important is to make sure the child you have a timer system in place, so the child knows that if they ask for a break, they can have a break. So the child would be taught, let's say they start to have a tantrum or something. So what you would do is you'd prompt them to say, I need a break. They'd look at let's say, whatever you've taught them to look at, or you can model it verbally, and they'll say, I need a break, or break. And then what you do is you immediately set the timer, and initially you'd set it for, let's say, 5 seconds. And so they would now start to condition. This is a combination of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So they would learn, I asked for a break, and I get the break as soon as the buzzer goes. And then you gradually increase the timer. So then they actually learn that they have to wait for 10 minutes before they get their break. But that stops their behavior, because we only have those challenging behaviors because we feel frustrated and we don't feel like we're getting what we want. And no one's listening to us.
Okay, I got it back up. So the additional part of it, some of the notes are concerning to me because I already told them, the teachers, when he started the school, that he will do this. The teachers are saying if the door is left open on accident, he will run out, but he never gets very far. But this is what the teachers are saying. Again, our IEP is tomorrow. What can I bring up to them so we can eliminate this behavior? And you've already touched on that a great deal. I'm sure that they have not done a BIP yet. This is the same kiddo who I asked Shannon about a few months ago, who jumped straight into our pool when we moved into our new house. So there's a little bit of impulse.
Right, and this is a little bit more than just escape maintained behavior. This is literally physical escape from the classroom, which can be dangerous. So what you need to ask for is, first of all, they need to do a BIP immediately. That's just ridiculous. Okay, so they have to do that right away. Second thing is, and in order to do a BIP, they need to do a functional behavior assessment in order to identify that. Now, second thing is, though, that you need to definitely get some sort of security on that door. There are these alarms where if the door is left open, the alarm goes off. I don't care how they do it. They need the resources. They need to make sure they can put at very minimum, there's a little thing on the end of the door that closes it automatically so it doesn't allow the door to stay open. They need to definitely put one of those on. So, because you're concerned more about a safety issue, I think, than anything else, they have to do that. And as long as he gets out of the door, he's gotten what he wants.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of he doesn't get far. At this point, his escape is not even really escaping. It's more about disrupting people and having someone search after him, which is probably kind of fun for him. So he absolutely cannot be allowed to leave the room at all. So they have to be very cautious about that.
And I think you're right to be concerned. How great is it that you got an IEP tomorrow?
Yes,
because
good
otherwise
for you.
you'd be making one. And I think as a parent, a lot of times when somebody is underreacting, we feel bad and like maybe we're overreacting. Let go of that. Go ahead and overreact. So that you can get them up to where you are, because I think you're exactly right. It's a safety issue. Right. I would encourage you to have a tape recorder at your IEP, and I would say avante aquendo at least 3 times during the IEP to let them know that you're serious and that there have been consequences before, and that if they lose your child, that you already brought up avante aquendo during your IEP. Let them know that you're the kind of mom that this is not going to work.
That's right.
Be nice.
Yeah.
Bring cookies, but let them know.
Absolutely.
I'll have your back.
So, and I know we're out of time,
Yes,
but
totally
I do want to quickly address something else that came in, which was from a card parent who was basically saying, can cards stop taking on new clients because we older clients are not being fulfilled, our hours are not being fulfilled. And while I hear often say that I think that it's important to get the hours that we recommend, if we recommend 40 hours, it's important to get the 40 hours. This parent is saying that unfortunately that doesn't always happen with card clients because we are taking on new clients and then we're short on therapists. So this is a real problem, and I do want to address it because I don't want to be preaching something that doesn't really happen, and I want to empower parents to help us with this. The problem is that, first of all, you have to know that, personally, from my perspective, obviously, I want to be able to help as many people as I possibly can. There really shouldn't be a reason that we say no to parents, because recruiting and bringing in new therapists is not such a hard thing to do. We should be able to train them fast enough, which we do. And we have a huge training department. We have more people in training than anything. But the bigger issue, I think, is that you have to realize that most of the funding that we receive now for you, for any card parent, is insurance. And insurance will not accept us or any other agency in network unless we are able to start clients within a certain period of time. For instance, I'll give you an example that's happening right now. Kaiser will only accept us as an in-network provider if we agree that when they refer a patient to us, we start the patient within, are you ready for this? 10 days. 10 days, which is an extreme burden on us. It is an extreme, it's very, very difficult for us to take Kaiser patients that fast. But why do we try to do it? Because if we said no, then all of our existing kids and any other child who is a Kaiser patient would never be able to get to us. And these are the types of burdens that parents don't realize we're constantly committing to. Another one is TRICARE. We have regulations that we need to adhere to in order to remain in network, if we're lucky enough to get in network to begin with. And the reason we do everything we can to do those things is just so we can help more of our existing kids. Now, having said that, it is still a problem. Now, here's how you as a parent can help us. We have a recruiting department now, which is growing, but if you can help us to recruit therapists, if you know what, I go to Islands restaurants and I see these wonderful people working there, and I constantly give out my card. And some of our best therapists here are people that I've recruited from places like Islands or Starbucks or whatever. So if you help us recruit therapists, that's one way you can help us. Another way you can help us is by allowing us to do overlaps on your child's case, bringing new trainees and allowing us to teach them using your child is another way. Another way you can help us is by being flexible and opening your schedule. A lot of parents will put things in their schedule which really are nowhere near as important as ABA. I've had parents say, oh, but we can't give you those hours because he has basketball practice. And let me tell you, as much as I care about socialization, nothing is more important than your ABA sessions. So if you can make more hours available to us, then that helps. Because, if you're like, I still have issues with parents even pulling their children out once a month in the morning, pulling your child out from school so you can come to clinic, so that the supervisor can see what's going on with your child. Those types of things are just what you can do to help us more. And then finally, if you are able to bring your child to the center, as opposed to having all of our therapists drive to you, then that speeds things up significantly. Imagine the amount of time our therapists spend driving. I know it's more convenient for parents, but the truth is, research shows that therapy can be done just as well in the centers. So those are just a few things that you can do as a family, as a current card family, to help us out, because all we're really trying to do is help as many kids as we can.
Absolutely.